James Lupton, delighted to be joined today on the podcast with Mr. Jimmy Tibbs. Jimmy, how are you, sir?
Very well, thank you.
Good stuff. Today we're going to talk about Nigel Benn. You had a very successful working relationship with Nigel. 7 fights, all world title fights with 0 defeats. But first of all, take me back to the beginning. When was the first time you met Nigel?
Well, I've known Nigel before he turned professional, actually, when he was at West End Boys Boxing Club. My son Jimmy, he was boxing at West End Boxing Club, and Nigel Benn was the star of the show at West End. He'd fight anyone.
Did you know from then that he was going to go on to be so successful as a pro?
I knew when he turned pro that he was going to do very well because of his punching ability, and also he could box. That came out more later on when I got with him, but he was a bit of an all-rounder. He knew when to box and knew when to fight.
You mentioned even as an amateur, he would box anybody. He had that same mentality as a professional. Was he feared as an amateur?
Oh, I think so, yeah. I mean, I didn't go to every one of his fights at West End, but he had some great fights against a couple of ABA champions, actually. He won one and lost one. I can't think of the boy's name. Who won? He was a West End boy, I know, I think. But anyway, they had one each. He got beat the first one, but that just shows of the character. He couldn't wait to get back to have the second one, and he revenged it.
Definitely. Talk to me about how the link-up happened between the two of you.
But when he turned pro, the link-up started. What I've heard, I had Michael Watson boxing Chris Eubank Senior, White Hart Lane. And as you know, Michael got injured, but it was a great fight, one of the most ferocious middleweight fights or super middleweight fights that I've ever been involved with. And Nigel was there watching that fight with his friend, and he said to his friend, "I'd like to be fit like that, like Michael was." Even though Michael lost the fight, he was very fit. He was always in front. It was such a ferocious fight, but Michael was always that little bit in front of Eubanks that night. And to give Eubanks his due, he did come back and win it. There's no doubt about that. But it was a ferocious fight, and Nigel Benn said to his friend, "I want to be as fit as Michael, I want to be like that." That's what I was told. And anyway, the man who he told it to got in touch with me, and I had a meet with him, Nigel, and I'll think of the man's name in a minute, but he come round to see, both of them come round to see me in my house. I lived in Seven Kings, I had a bungalow there. We had a meet, and he said he wanted me to train him. Would I mind going to Tenerife? I said, no, it doesn't make no difference where I go to train. And we still had a verbal contract there, and it went very well.
I was told that you almost didn't take up the offer to become a coach with Nigel. I believe he was with Chris Pye at the time, and you didn't want to sort of leave Chris and go and train with Nigel. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. It's not that I didn't want to take him up. I never ever said I don't want to take him up. Chris Pye wasn't world champion. Chris Pye was a 10-round fight, and let me say, Chris Pye is one of the best fighters I've ever trained. But what happened? I'm taking on a guy, Nigel Benn, who's going to fight for a world title. I didn't want to leave Chris behind because he's got his world title coming up. So I arranged it so I could train him at certain times and train Nigel Benn in Tenerife. Actually, Nigel Benn said to me, "Jim, you want to bring Chris out here, bring him out." But for some reason, Chris couldn't do it. But I had someone to look after Chris. And when I come back, I always done the job with Nigel. And then I got to work with Chris for his world title. And he won the world title after after a couple of years when I was with Nigel.
As we mentioned, obviously, with Nigel, your 7 fights together, all world title fights. Just talk to me about the experience you had in those fights with Nigel at the top level.
Oh, well, it was a great experience. When I first got with him, he was always had his chin. Actually, when Chris Pye was fighting one night up in Manchester somewhere, he was on the same bill. We was watching Nigel Benn fight, and I noticed how Nigel, every time he jabbed, he lifted his head up. And I said to Chris Pye, I said, "He could always get caught with a right hand over that left leg. He's got to be careful." And I wasn't with him then. Anyway, I didn't think I'd finish up with him, but when I got with him in Tenerife, we loosened up, and I just said to him, "Nigel, keep that chin just on the chest a little bit, relax, relax, nice jab. And he learned how to box. When they was a bit ferocious, he could outbox them, and then he softened them up, and then he could go to work on them. That's the way I taught him. He liked it. We had a very, very good relationship for as long as it lasted out there, and he was good to work with. Fantastic to work with.
You've mentioned Tenerife a couple of times. Talk to me about your time out there in Tenerife. What's the difference between training in the sun compared to over here?
Well, it's not so much in the sun. We didn't train in the sun. We was inside. But it is what it is. It doesn't matter where you are. If you get away, if you're lucky enough to get away at a training camp, most fighters can't afford to do it. But if you can get away at a training camp, it's all concentrating on your fighting, your opponent, your boxing. And it works around that. It's 100% that way.
Talk to me about, obviously, he was very relentless in the ring on fight night. Talk to me about during camps and sparring partners. How difficult was it to get or keep sparring partners?
Well, it's not difficult to get sparring partners if you pay them enough money. That's the first thing, right? It's a little, sometimes I've had to say, many a time I've had to say to Nigel, just go a little bit steady with this one. Or this other one, you can open up on him. Different types, it all depends who they are. But we always had a good liaison with the sparring partners. There's one time when we had about 4 or 5 sparring partners there, 4 sparring partners actually, when he was fighting the kid from York.
Henry Walton.
Who?
Henry Walton.
That's it, Henry Walton, good fighter. And he just couldn't get it together with the sparring partner. So I said, look, nice, pay him off. I'll work the pads with you for your title fight. And it worked, and that's one of the best nights he fought. He boxed beautiful that night. So, it can, because he had confidence in himself.
Difference does that make? Because, like you say, obviously taking the pads for the majority of the camp is completely different to sparring. And they say sparring is, of course, important in the lead up to a fight. But what was it that was different about that one that he performed so well?
The difference with that one, he was #1 contender. And lots of people said it's a 50-50 fight, which I always said to Nigel, 50-50, but I always fancied Nigel to beat him. He outboxed him. Beautiful. He looked like Sugar Ray Leonard that night. Beautiful. 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 And relaxed, under 12 rounds easy. Never had no problem.
Now, you've coached many different types of fighters and different styles of fighters. What was Nigel like compared to the other guys you've worked with? How much did you have to change as a coach?
The difference between Nigel, Nigel, as I say, he could afford to go abroad, and we just concentrated on Nigel. I just concentrated on him. And with other fighters, if you're training in the gym and you've got, see, when I had a gym full of fighters, and I had a title fight like with Michael Watson when he fought Eubank, I would train all them other fighters at different times and have Michael in last. You've got, because if you're a trainer, you can't have 10, 12, 15 fighters in the gym who are yours and train them all together. It's impossible. So you've got to break them down in times. That's what I used to do. Even when I worked with Terry Lawrence, with Bruno and all that little crowd, break them down in times. And that's what I used to, and that's what you've got to do when you're in England. But when you go abroad, somewhere like Tenerife, or if you go up north or south, wherever you go to train, if you've got the time, to do it. You've got the fighter on yourself, on your own, with yourself and these friends. Not too many of his friends, but a couple of friends. And that's how it is. It works better.
So we've mentioned it was a successful working relationship during fight night. What's your favourite memory of your time with Nigel?
My favourite memory, what I got. Right, when he beat the boy from York. What's his name again? I'm sorry, I'm not being rude.
Henry Walton.
Henry Walton, yeah, good fighter, Walton. When he beat Henry Walton, that was my favourite night. And also when he boxed the Welsh kid, who Frank Warren had, big, tall, slim guy. Sorry about that. But he stopped him in about 9 rounds, got to his body, made him miss with his jab, just kept creeping up on him, working his body, and he stopped him in 9 rounds. What's his name? He's one of the cleverest.
Nicky Piper.
Who?
Nicky Piper.
Nicky Piper, thank you. I'm sorry about this. My old memory's gone a bit. Nicky Piper, that was a great night. That was all great nights, but they're the two that stand out for me.
We spoke about him obviously in the ring and your working relationship, but what was Nigel like away from the ring, outside as a person?
With me, he was a gentleman. Always acted a gentleman. Come round my house many times to pay me, and all I can say was I never went out dancing and jukeboxing where he used to go, actually. But when he was round me, he was a gentleman.
I want to get back into one of his fights. His draw that you had with yourself was Chris Eubank Senior. As you mentioned, you had Eubank previously as an opponent for Michael Watson. How did you first of all prepare Nigel for Chris Eubank after being in a fight with him before?
Well, I wasn't with him with the first fight, obviously, you know that.
Yep.
So the second fight is we got him fit. We made sure we got the right sparring partners in. We had sparring for that fight because Nigel fought very well. Right, I was told Nigel to stick to his chest, stick to his chest like glue. Don't leave him. Make him fight 3 minutes a round. Make him fight. Work his body, head, body. That's what he done. We lost a point for it in low. I didn't think it was, but that's the way it goes. If we don't lose that point, we win the fight.
What did you think of the outcome? As a draw, scored a draw. Did you feel that was fair?
Well, it could have been worse, put it that way. We both kept our titles, so he was still champion of the world. Eubanks was still champion of the world, so we both go on. You've got to accept it. You can't change it. So I just accepted it. Nigel was very upset. He thought he won it. But I thought we sort of, I didn't say too much, but I thought we just nicked it, but we didn't win it. We got a draw. So I just went along with it.
You mentioned that he was very upset, Nigel was. How do you deal with that as a coach? How do you console a fighter?
Well, all fighters are different. You console them in different ways. You can put your arm around them and say, look, don't worry, come again. Or you can say, you didn't do enough to win it. Let me tell you the truth. It all depends where they are in their stage of fighting and who they are and how strong they are mentally as well as physically. And I've dealt with hundreds of fighters. They're all different, but I managed to get through to most of them.
Do you feel, between the two of them, there seemed to be a clear hatred between Nigel and Chris Eubank? Do you feel that was part of the reason why he was so upset he didn't get the win?
Maybe then. I don't think there's a clear hatred now between them. I don't think so. But I know there was a bit of an hatred beforehand. But I didn't worry about that. I didn't have that even come into my mind. I just wanted to do my job. And he knows how I work. He knows he's got to do his job for me. That was why he's paying me.
Absolutely. We saw, obviously, after he retired, there was talk of a comeback fight. Even very recently, talking of him coming back into the ring. Has he always had that fighter's mentality? Do you feel he's struggled to leave boxing behind after retirement?
Well, most fighters do that. They turn it in, and after they've had a little while rest, they want to come back. Some can come back because they're not too old. But Nigel, at that age, I think he was in his 50s. Am I right saying that?
Yeah.
You can't come back in your 50s and start him and Eubank's fighting again. I'm glad that never happened. It's embarrassing.
Definitely. I just want to mention the two sons, Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. With that, do you see any needle from the parents here, or do you feel it is just a case of it's easy marketing?
I think there's a little bit of needle there because Chris Jr.'s trying to wind him up, and Conor's not got. He shouldn't bite. He don't want to bite too much. I think it'll be a fantastic fight, and it all depends about the weight, how much he's got to come down. 3 pound, 157, isn't he?
Yeah.
157. He's so I'm not saying I was up against him once with Billy Joe Saunders, and he made the weight. You don't know how he made the weight when he was in middleweight, whether he done it comfortable or not. Billy Joe always struggled to make the weight. He had to work hard and sweat here. So I don't know how he did. But if he did struggle, then he's got to take an extra 3 pound off. That's going to be very, very hard. But as I say, I don't know if he struggled to make middleweights. If he did, it's going to be very, very tricky for him.
You mentioned making the weight and things like that. With Nigel, what was Nigel like with the making the weight and weight cuts? Was he always sort of on weight? Did he have to lose a lot? What was he like? How disciplined was he?
I had him in super middle. He was very disciplined, always on the weight, done it perfect. Never ever messed up about a weight. As I trained him for them 7 fights, he was what you call the unique professional.
Just flicking back over to the Suns fights, just to get a little prediction from you on that. How do you see that going? Do you think Chris will be too big for Conor? Because Conor's got to come up quite a bit as well.
He'll come up to about 150 something. I think Conor come up a little bit. I don't know where he'll come up, but he's got this. See, when you've not got to worry about weight, this is how I found it. Even when I was fighting, if you ain't got to worry about weight, you've got your energy. You've got so much energy, you can dance around that ring and do what you like. But when you're tight for weight and you've got to work it down, it can get to you. I'm not saying it will get to him, but it can get to people. And it's going to be very, very. It's a 50-50 fight. That's how I see it.
Do you think Conor could lose any of his speed by putting on the weight? Because he's not fought at that weight before. Could he be a bit sluggish?
Nah, never. No, I don't think so.
No?
No, I don't think so. It could either make you have more energy, more speed.
And also, finally, I want to touch on
the fight is through speed. You're too smart for him. Got to box it.
The last thing I want to mention to yourself, Jimmy, about 6 years ago, down the West Ham Boxing Club, you took Conor and Nigel both on the pads that day. Did you think with Conor at that time, he was obviously a lot lighter than he is, a lot smaller, did you see him with a big future?
Oh, well, not really then, no. But after he went, and he went with Eddie Earn, I think, that time, and Nigel was guiding him a bit, then I could see that he's got a potential to do something. And now he's fighting for a lot of money. He's in big time now. And he's done very well for himself. Chris Eubank Jr.'s done very well for him. They've both done well for themselves. And as I say, it'll be a 50-50 fight. It's very hard to pick. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to watching it.
With Nigel, obviously, he's got the advice to pass on to his son. He's going to want to give his son the best advice he can. How much knowledge will Nigel be able to pass on to Conor going into a big fight like this?
Well, how much knowledge will he take off his father?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, yeah. Well, obviously, like, his dad's going to advise him because he's been there and done it. But he's got a good trainer in Tony Sims, and they've done quite well without Nigel being around him, and is what I could make out of. But I think having Nigel there is added to the potential that he's going to be right on the night, having his father there. His father's always been there to watch him fight. I don't know if he's ever been there to watch him train 100% at the training camp, but I think he has, and I think that's a good thing because I'm sure Tony Sims gets on very well with. He did get on very well with Nigel, and it can only add to his artillery.
Absolutely. Well, Jimmy, I want to thank you very much for your time.